the freshly appointed justice minister who sent a former president to prison. Now Sergio Moro is on the defence after a website published what it says are leaked messages from a corruption probe during his time as a judge.
I can't even say if these messages are authentic. These are things that happened years ago. Judges speak to prosecutors, judges speak to the lawyers, judges speak to police. That is normal.
In the leaked messages, exchanges between Moro and prosecutors, in which he appears to give them advice on the focus and pace of their investigations. The lead prosecutor concerned also denies allegations of collusion, although he has offered an apology of sorts.
Even though we don't believe these scattered messages are trustworthy, we do recognize that they're making some people uncomfortable, and we're deeply sorry about that.
Moro was the highest-ranking judge in the 5-year-long anti-corruption car wash probe, which jailed scores of politicians and business figures. The Chief Justice was personally responsible for handing a custodial sentence to ex-President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, a decision that blocked him from seeking re-election last year. Lula's lawyers are now saying his sentence should be overturned. Reaction on the streets is mixed.
From what was shown, this calls his impartiality into question.
It was a private conversation in a private sphere, so I don't see any misconduct. I can't see anything that would tarnish Sergio Moro's image.
Not yet, perhaps. But the site that published the messages is promising that the exchanges between Moro and prosecutors revealed so far are only the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, the judge was working with the prosecution all throughout the case and informing them on how to present the case in order to railroad one of the most successful progressive politicians on the planet. And
right.
Like I said, railroaded the fuck out of him and put him in prison so that even because he was overwhelmingly favored to win another term, so they had to step in and do what they did. And I mean, this is what made it possible for Bolsonaro, the just disgusting fucking anti-LGBTQ bigot piece of shit fascist motherfucker. Right. So, I mean, and, you know, I just want to say, just, you know, for the record, that Rad Khan is Brazilian and has family and friends in Brazil. And this is, it's just important to know that, I think, as we discuss this issue. So, I mean, Rad, you undoubtedly have thoughts, comrade.
Well, of course, what we've seen most recently is that because the Workers' Party has been in power in Brazil for so long.
Lula's party, which is Lula's party, the Workers' Party.
Yeah, Lula's party. They're a socialist party. They're and he's overwhelmingly the most popular president they've ever had. And keep in mind that this is a country that's only had democratic elections of any kind since 1985 or 1986. And before that, it was all right-wing dictatorships, kind of like Pinochet. And so ever since they actually had some level of democracy in the country, the Workers' Party has been overwhelmingly the most popular party. They've been pretty much the only party that's been in power. It was the party that took up most of the seats in their parliament. And it was, you know, they set up, you know, sort of a fledgling economy that operated under, you know, their, you know, in theory socialism, but still operating within the context of global capitalism.
So more like social democrats, right? It's really more on the social democrat tip. I mean, like, loosely, right?
Right, like the philosophical part and theory of their party is more socialist, more like workers seize the means of production.
Oh, okay.
But obviously they have to operate under the context of capitalism, and specifically global late stage imperialist capitalism. And so they've had their own problems too. And again, what I was saying is this is a pretty young fledgling democracy in the grand scheme of things. They've only been a democracy for like 30 years. And they eventually hit a recession. But it was also during the same time where all these other recessions were happening all at once around the globe. So it's not like they were necessarily in a recession. It was more like they felt the impact of this mass scale global recession that's been going on.
Basically, they felt the global recession that was put in place by the disgusting fucking scum shit motherfuckers from Wall Street when they stole the economy from us in 2008. Right? Weird that the fifth largest economy in the world was directly affected by what these fucking...
You'd think so, right? And so for that reason, it was, they were able to lift a lot of people out of poverty. They didn't get the entire country out of poverty, but that was a pretty big task at hand over 25, 30 years or whatever. But you should have seen what the country looked like and just how overall backward it was, even as recently as like the late 70s, early 80s. And it still had work to do, but then what ended up happening is that there were reactionaries, I don't know, probably highly influenced, world's smallest violin influenced by the imperialist powers.
CIA.
To try and bring down the socialist-minded party that had been in power for all those years and had the most popular president of all time. And so, obviously, since there were right-wing reactionaries, their first move was to blame the socialists for the recession. And there were, obviously there were corruption scandals left and right, even long before Lava Jato. But, it's political corruption like that is one of the unfortunate byproducts of capitalism that is a pretty commonplace thing, and it's still a developing country, so it had a lot of its own internal problems that it was still in the process of working out. But everyone's always quick to blame the corruption, but it's like they're usually not very specific as far as how or what exactly, and it seems like they almost have these fantasies of the Bolsonaro type hard asses are going to come along and they're going to put all these corrupt motherfuckers in prison and lock them all up and take all the criminals off the street and lock them up. You're going to clean this place up. That's kind of like, that right-wing bro mentality that you really see a lot, that I've actually heard kind of with a lot of Bolsonaro supporters. And there's other reasons that people support him too. It's not just the right-wing sort of, bro shit talker types. There's a lot of old money there too, and those types definitely support people like Bolsonaro. And some of those people did start to get unfair advantages once Brazil slowly started to,
well, look,
a little bit more in global capitalism, and
well, if
it's a complicated
Lula,
thing.
what I would say, I don't know a whole lot about the Bolivarian Revolution or whatever, but I mean, that's what this comes out of. But it was fresh and it was new, and this whole... what Lula was doing was fragile as fuck. But it was about to be solidified. If he got this other term, so much of what he had been trying to put in place, like, that's the thing, is like, when you try to like subvert the mechanisms of oppressive capitalism and put something in place that's beneficial to the actual workers and the people and the middle and lower classes, right, it doesn't just happen overnight and kick ass and all of a sudden it's bitching. It's super vulnerable in that transitional stage. And by them sticking Lula in fucking prison over some bullshit trumped up thing, to have this judge work, I don't know, I already said it, but to have this fucking judge work with the prosecution throughout, how is that even remotely just and fair? And like, no, it's and completely backed by Western influence and money, meaning the United fucking States of imperialist pieces of shit. But
right,
yeah, go ahead, Red.
And the EU also, I'm sure. I mean, there's multiple global elite parties that could be behind this entire fucking thing. I mean, you know, there's plenty of other.
Oh no! You know what? No! Check it out. No, check it out. Huh? I'm gonna play. I want to play this clip. This is from a fucking Senate Intelligence hearing speech. It's from earlier in the week, and I'm not going to validate this motherfucker who's going to say it, because he goes on to talk a bunch of fear-mongering bullshit on China and stuff. But I want to play this beginning, just this little clip, because he talks about all the different right-wing powers that are consolidating throughout the globe, which is supremely relevant to what's happening in Brazil, the Philippines, you know, with Orban, and so, yeah, let me play this real quick, and unless you guys had any other thoughts, actually, yeah, neither SoCal Shannon nor Maximo Moss have had an opportunity to chime in on this.
Yeah,
so
the DSA analogy is one thing I was gonna say, and I was gonna bring up the Philippines, and you guys did, so. Figured I wouldn't. I'm just gonna reiterate that.
Okay, so
yeah, there's multiple global powers in place. Is what's most likely what's going on here, and you know, we just recently at Davos we saw Bolsonaro sitting next to Tim Cook at the dinner table. That was 11 fascists at that dinner table. I know I've said that before.
Check this clip out. This capitalist, imperialist fucking piece of shit is about to explain the consolidation of global fascism.
Viewed, I think, objectively, you would have to conclude that the autocrats are on the rise in places like Turkey and in Egypt, in the Philippines and in Brazil, in Hungary and in Poland, in the rise of the far-right parties, in Austria, in Germany, in France, and elsewhere. And in the context of this challenge to the very idea of democracy, you would expect in a normal world that the U.S. president would be pushing back, would be the champion of democracy and human rights. But instead, we are at a strange and dangerous time in which the President of the United States is making common cause with the autocrats, who is disdainful of fellow democracies. And that is challenging the very idea of democracy. We have foreign leaders who now quote the United States president for anti-democratic reasons. You have Erdogan and Bashar al-Assad and Duterte in the Philippines talking about fake news and condemning press criticism of the corruption within their governments. And other foreign leaders who similarly mimic the words of the U.S. president in disparaging the opposition, in denigrating their own judiciaries or their own press. And so we're at a very dangerous time. I think that for most of us who grew up in the post-World War II generation, we felt that the increase in freedoms, the fact that year after year more people were living in a free society, more people able to practice their faith or express themselves or associate with whom they would or love whom they would, that somehow this was inexorable. Somehow, to paraphrase Martin Luther King, the moral arc of the universe was long, but it was bending towards justice, and that justice meant that we were in an ever-increasing liberalization with greater and greater numbers of people in representative forms of government, only to find that there's nothing at all inexorable about this. That in fact we are at an inflection point where we cannot say with confidence that the next generation is going to be freer than our own, let alone next year. And so I think this is a great and grave threat to the United States, this ideological competition that we're in which many young people, many young Americans, when they're asked about democracy and whether democracy is the best form of government, now express doubt. As we recede, as the memories of World War II recede further and further into the past, we're at risk of having to learn those horrible lessons all over again. And so it's a dangerous time.